Today in Across the Fence, we spotlight the practice of cover cropping. It's a tried and true technique that helps manage erosion, improve soil fertility, and keep some extra green in the farmer's pocket. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. By most accounts, 2014 is a good year for farmers. Now it's time to assess what improvements need to be made before starting all over again in the spring. One area that concerns farmers and Vermonters is the water quality of Lake Champlain, which is negatively affected by farm and urban runoff. Farmers know they play a role in contributing to the problem. As stewards of the land, farmers also know how to meet this challenge by doing what they do best, growing crops. Across the Fence's Keith Silva attended a workshop where farmers were all about keeping it green.
The general farming population is really trying to do the right thing.
Once the corn has been chopped, farmers know winter won't be far behind.
The rye was like, you could almost like, is that a weed coming? Almost like
for Tony Pouliot, this winter is going to be a little different, a little greener. Pouliot is growing cover crops. Shortly after his corn was cut, he planted ryegrass, radishes, turnip, and white clover. The results and the benefits of this technique are now starting to show.
There's two major benefits to the cover crop. One is a stabilization of our soils. Don't lose what you got. And then on top of it, these plants are taking up nutrients that are in the soil. So next spring comes around, there's less volatilization, there's less precipitation. The nutrients are staying in the soil. They're staying in the plant. So next year, this stuff, when we till it in, is actually a natural fertilizer.
If the ryegrass, most of the ryegrass seed was right here, it probably did compete pretty heavily with.
Pouliot developed his cover cropping plan in collaboration with the University of Vermont Extension's Northwest Crops and Soils team. Together, the two are hosting a field day at Pouliot's farm to share what they've learned.
We have a broad range of folks that come to these field days. We have farmers that are really interested. Maybe they haven't started cover cropping and they really want to see what other farmers are doing. Because if their neighbor or really their colleague is cover cropping and they're having good success, then they'll likely try it too. So they're here on a fact-finding mission. And then there's other farms that are here that are already cover cropping and they're just interested to see what other people are doing. Maybe they're doing something a little bit differently, trying a different species, a different method, and just really engaged in trying to take cover cropping to a different level, maybe on their farm.
Plant in a green crop.
Pouliot is a recent convert to cover cropping. He tried the technique before, but without any success. Inspired by a no-till conference he attended earlier this year, Pouliot made up his mind to give cover cropping another shot and asked UVM Extension for help.
This time I sat down and I said, guys, let's give it the best chance we have. This is how I want to do it. Will it work? And they said, yes, let's do it this way, this way, this way. And here it is, UVM Extension. You get somebody like Heather and her staff. 2 days we had it all figured out and it was spread. Without people like her that's had experience with this stuff, it's a shot in the dark. This utterly could have failed without somebody there saying, no, we've tried that. Don't use this, try this instead. So you need somebody to shine a light in the direction you need to head, and then you need to go find the light switch and turn it on.
When I started in Extension in 2003, I can bring you to the one field in the county that was cover cropped. And I remember talking to that farmer saying, why are you doing this? I want to do this. I learned about this in college, you know. I want everybody to do this, but nobody's doing it. And why are you doing it? And now, you know, there's thousands of acres in cover cropping. And that's really just changed over the last probably 2 to 3 years. And that's really exciting because now when you drive through Vermont in the fall, you don't see a lot of brown fields where the corn's been removed. You see green, and they're not weeds growing. You know, they're a soil protector, you know, a crop really, just a different kind.
Just different. And
so it'd be great if the whole field looked like this.
Well, next year it will.
Cover crops protect the farmer's most valuable asset, their soil. They also have an extra benefit of being a colorful addition to public relations.
So when I look at this, I don't necessarily see money spent. I love the green, I love the color. So when I look across this field, I see a living thing. And the green adds to the living.
I do feel that people initially started cover cropping because of the pressure from the public and also from regulatory agencies to reduce erosion coming out of cornfields. And really that's probably where it started. But now we have farmers looking at this from a much different perspective, a much broader perspective of cover crops are really helping us, and they offer us so much. How do we implement them to our advantage, from both an economic advantage? There's a lot of economic gains with cover cropping, from yield gains to fertility to added feed. And how do we make that work in our advantage? What do we do? What are the best practices to use? So they're much more sophisticated and much more sophisticated questions than where we were probably 5 years ago, where people were just maybe doing it for one reason.
This is all what I call minimum tillage. We till the top.
For now, Tony Pouliot is done harvesting corn. And as for next year's crop, well, he already has that covered. In Westford, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Well, thank you, Keith. Joining me now is Heather Darby. As we heard in Keith's report, Heather is an agronomist and the leader of UVM Extension's Northwest Crops and Soils team. Welcome.
Thanks, Judy.
Tell me how water quality issues affect farmers professionally and personally.
Yeah, well, you know, farmers are just like anyone else in the community, really, and they have a high valued stake in the lake. Both as a community member, someone living around the lake, they like to fish, they like to boat, they like to bring their kids there to swim, and so they care about the lake just like everyone else. But also as business operators, they care about the lake because a lot of farmers also get water from the lake for their animals, and it's really important for that water to be clean.
How do you feel when agriculture is kind of singled out as the reason for algae blooms in Lake Champlain?
Yeah, it's disappointing actually when farmers are singled out, or farming in general, because it really shows me that that people don't have a good understanding of what's going on out in the community and the environment. And certainly farmer agriculture plays a role in the overall quality of the lake, but it's certainly not the only issue that's out there. And so I feel that farmers understand the role that they play and what they need to do to help clean up the lake, and they're doing it. So that's what's really great.
And do you think that's going to take increased regulation from federal or state agencies?
Yeah, I think that it's always best when anyone sort of makes the right decisions on their own, on their own terms, and also just learning about something and really wanting to do things for the right reason. But oftentimes I think in all situations there's sometimes need for a little push to get things done. I don't know if there needs to be increased regulation necessarily. We have quite a few already. Vermont actually has more regulations than most every other dairy state that exists. So I think a lot of the regulations are in place. It's just continued education and outreach from people like myself to really get things on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the farmer in Keith's story, and he sees this as a great advantage for him. They're on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, and it takes people time, right? We learn something once, and then we usually have to learn it again, and then it's when there's risks associated with something, we're a little bit slow to adopt them sometimes, especially when there's financial risk.
Well, right. I mean, there's a price when you do a cover crop.
Exactly. And so some people are slow to get on board. We also have our kind of the innovators. It's like that everywhere, and it takes the innovators to show everyone else that it's possible, that it works, and we're always watching the innovators, right? And then we follow them, and so that's what's great about cover cropping and seeing not everyone else, but so many more farms doing it today than have done it in the past.
So what are some of the strategies to curb soil erosion and nutrient runoff other than cover crops?
Yeah, cover crops is just one, just one practice that we promote to farmers, but there are many practices that farmers need to implement to reduce erosion, because the cover crop's only there during one part of the year, a very sensitive part of the year, but just sort of during the winter months. The other practices that we promote to farmers are really good crop rotations that improve the overall health of the soil. And when you have very healthy soil, it actually tends to be more resistant to degradation and soil loss. And practices that improve soil health include reduced tillage, proper nutrient applications, and also crop rotations and cover crops.
Well, you see the classic shot of the farmer spreading manure in the field. And I was talking to one farmer when I was doing a story, and they said, what people don't realize is the manure is a huge asset to us. It's something very valuable. We don't want it rushing off our fields.
Yeah, I mean, right, so manure is chock full of nutrients, and it's highly valuable to the farming community. And they want to utilize it in the best way possible to grow their crops. They don't want to lose those dollars. They're actually dollars. They've spent money to make manure. It's not free, and it's not a waste product. It's actual highly valued resource. And so we work with farmers on a very regular basis to help them develop plans to apply fertilizer or to apply the manure in a way that reduces potential environmental degradation, but also in a way that promotes crop productivity.
And so is every farm different?
Oh gosh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. Every farm is completely different. And, that's what makes it difficult. And that's why we try to do these projects on farm, so that farmers can come out and see other farms implementing cover crops, and they can take away something, usually, that they could implement on their farm. But once they bring it home, they have to tweak it for their particular situation too. So what works well for one person, generally needs to be slightly modified. And we recognize that, and work with individual farmers as much as we can to help them make the practices work.
Do you work with small farmers?
We work with every farmer. Anybody who wants to work with us, we want to work with them. And small, large, medium, organic, conventional. We have no funnels we put people in. We just we work with everybody.
Does it take a lot of time sometimes? I mean, yes. You don't just arrive on a farm and say you need to do this, and then the next year it happens.
Yeah, change, I think we all know change is difficult, especially when you're used to doing something the same way for a very long period of time. And so sometimes it takes years to get people to, as you heard in the video, see the light, turn the light switch on.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't take long at all. And I've been at this for a few years now. I don't plan to stop, and I'm pretty persistent. I haven't had anybody ask me to leave, but sometimes, you just kind of keep working at it, and eventually, usually people will try something for you.
Do you have a lot of workshops? We saw the field days. Is that typical of what you do?
We do, yeah. And again, really the goal of the workshop is to bring people out into the farming community, to their neighbors or someplace even further away from their farm, so that they can see these practices in place. They can read about them in trade magazines, they can hear about it from me, at a conference, but until they see it actually in practice, we always say seeing is believing. Sometimes that's the point that will push them to do something.
And also be able to ask a farmer who's doing that, what was the roadblock that you ran into? What did this cost you? What else did you have to do?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest value for the farmers being there, is just networking with each other. And even at this particular field day, Tony was having some challenges with something, and one of the other farmers said, well, why don't you try this? So, it's a great way to share information.
So what do you think needs to happen in the next 10 years looking ahead?
Well, I think that I foresee even more green in our future, and I would love to see every corn field in Vermont cover cropped, and I believe that's completely possible. And so there's still a lot of work to do, and we can't stop. We never can stop. This is the new normal for us, to keep the ground covered, to protect the soil from erosion. And that's where I see us in the future, that the fields are green all the time. because that means there's something actively growing, and when there's plants actively growing, they're holding the soil in place. And that's what we want to do.
All right. Well, for more information about cover cropping, rather, you can visit the Northwest Crops and Soils Program website. The address is uvm.edu/extension/crop soil. And Heather and her team are also working on a variety of other projects, including hops, oil seeds, and forages. Information about that work is also found on the website. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.